I'm Eleanor Hayes, 67 years old, and tonight, the wind outside could have sliced right through my bones. I stood at the front door of my son's townhouse in Portland, my gloved hands trembling as I fumbled with the key. It wouldn't turn. I tried again, once, twice, but the lock refused to yield. The cold bit through my coat, sharp and personal, as if it knew I no longer belonged there. For a long moment, I stared at the brass doorknob that used to welcome me home. The porch light flickered, throwing my shadow against the wall, an old woman, small and out of place. I told myself there had to be a mistake. Maybe the key had bent. Maybe I was just clumsy. But deep down, I felt something darker pressing against my ribs. They changed the lock. Just as I raised my hand to knock, the door opened. Warm air spilled out, carrying the smell of roasted chicken and detergent. My daughter-in-law, Chloe, stood there, framed by the glow of the living room behind her. She was holding her purse, nails immaculate, face calm, too calm. "Mom," she said, tilting her head, pretending surprise. "What are you doing out here? Did you forget your key?" I held up my old one, the metal dull and useless. "It doesn't work anymore," I whispered. "Did you change the lock?" Her brow furrowed slightly, a tiny wrinkle of annoyance rather than guilt. "Oh, that. Yeah, Ethan thought we should upgrade the security. Some strangers were spotted around the complex." She shrugged. "I must have forgotten to tell you." Forgotten. Such an easy word to erase someone with. I stepped inside, careful not to drip melted frost on a rug. The warmth of the house wrapped around me like a stranger's coat, close, but not comforting. Chloe walked past me, her heels clicking softly on the hardwood floor. "You shouldn't stand out there so long," she said lightly. "Someone might think we're mistreating you." Her tone sliced deeper than the wind had. I opened my mouth to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. She glanced back at me, her eyes skimming over my thrift store coat and muddy boots. The corner of her lips twitched, the faintest trace of a smirk. "An outsider like you really shouldn't be out in the cold." The sentence hung in the air like frost. For a heartbeat. I couldn't feel my fingers, my legs, even my heart. Then something inside me shifted. Quiet, hard, unbreakable. That was the night I realized. Maybe she was right. Maybe I didn't belong there anymore. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded different now, foreign, hollow. From my room at the end of the hallway, I could hear laughter drifting from the living room, low and intimate, the kind of laughter that used to include me. Once, I might have gone out there, brought them tea, pretended everything was fine, but not tonight. Tonight I stayed in the dark, sitting on the edge of my bed, my coat still on, the cold still clinging to me like shame I couldn't shake off. When Ethan and Chloe first asked me to move in, they said it would be for everyone's comfort. They had a mortgage to pay. I had more space than I needed in my little apartment after Arthur died. It seemed practical. Family helping family. I sold what was left of Arthur's old car, lent them the money for their down payment, and told myself it was love. For 10 years, I cooked their dinners, watched my grandson after school, and handed over the rent I earned from my old apartment. I called it contribution. Chloe called it help. I never realized how different those two words were until now. As I sat there that night, I saw the moments I'd ignored stacking up like bricks, each one a quiet warning I chose not to read. The way Chloe always introduced me to her friends as Ethan's mom who's staying with us, the way my opinion never seemed to count when they talked about remodeling or finances, the way my grandson, Caleb, started calling their bedroom the real home. It wasn't one betrayal. It was a slow erasure. The sound of the television faded, replaced by murmurs and then the faint thud of a door closing. The house went still. I walked to my dresser and opened the top drawer. Inside were only a few neatly folded sweaters, a small wooden box, and an old photo of Arthur and me in front of that tiny apartment we'd bought 40 years ago. The place wasn't fancy, peeling paint, creaky floors, but every inch of it held laughter and the smell of Sunday pancakes. My throat tightened. That apartment still existed. I'd rented it out for years, never thinking I'd need it again. Maybe I still had a key somewhere. I found it tucked in the corner of the drawer, tied with a faded blue ribbon. The sight of it felt like an open door after too long in a locked room. I ran my thumb over the worn metal and whispered, "Maybe this is what freedom feels like." The next morning, I walked into the kitchen while Chloe was packing Caleb's lunch. She looked surprised to see me up early. I poured myself coffee without asking permission and sat at the table. "I'll be moving out soon," I said calmly. Her hand froze midair, the sandwich knife hovering above the counter. "Moving out? Why?" I looked at her directly for the first time in months. "Because this isn't my home anymore." She blinked, then gave a short laugh, like she didn't quite believe me. "You don't have to be dramatic. Eleanor, we were just—" "I'm not being dramatic," I interrupted gently but firmly. "I'm just done being unwanted in a house I helped build." For the first time, she didn't have a quick reply. Her face softened a little, maybe even guilty, but pride rose faster. "If that's what you want," she said finally, turning back to her son's lunch, "I'll let Ethan know." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. The silence said enough. That day I started packing. Not everything, just what was mine. The sweater Arthur loved, a few framed photos, the box of letters from our younger years. I didn't tell Ethan. I wanted him to see the empty room and understand what that emptiness meant. By evening, my suitcase stood by the door. I sat beside it, exhausted but lighter than I'd felt in years. I expected sadness, maybe regret. Instead, there was only stillness, like the air before a storm. I glanced at the old key lying on the table. It gleamed faintly under the kitchen light. I could almost hear Arthur's voice. "You always know when it's time to leave. Ellie, you just forget to trust yourself." When Ethan came home that night, he found me waiting in the hallway. He frowned when he saw the suitcase. "Mom, what's going on?" "I'm going back to my own place," I said quietly. He sighed, rubbing his temples. "Did Chloe say something again? She can be blunt sometimes." "It's not about what she said." I told him. "It's about what I finally heard." He looked confused, hurt even, but he didn't stop me. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe deep down, he understood this was the consequence of all the things he hadn't said over the years. When I stepped outside, the night air felt different. The wind still cut sharp against my skin, but it no longer carried humiliation. It carried clarity. I walked toward the streetlight, pulling my coat tighter around me. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't walking away from something. I was walking back to myself. The apartment was smaller than I remembered. When I turned the key, the door creaked open with a sigh, as if the walls themselves were waking from a long sleep. Dust floated through the faint light from the window, each particle glinting like a memory suspended in the air. I stepped inside slowly, dragging my suitcase behind me. The place smelled of old paint, lavender detergent, and time. This was where Arthur and I had built our life. We argued here, laughed here, raised Ethan here. Every corner had known us. After he passed, I thought leaving this place for my son's house meant I was moving toward warmth and company. Instead, it had taken 10 years for me to realize I'd walked away from myself. I set my suitcase down and opened the curtains. Afternoon sunlight poured across the wooden floor, revealing the faint outline where our old sofa had been. I pressed my palm to the spot. "I'm home," I whispered. The quiet answered back. That night, I ate takeout noodles from the shop on the corner, sitting on an overturned crate because I hadn't brought any furniture yet. The city hummed outside, the kind of sound that used to annoy me when I was younger. Now it felt like company. I didn't feel lonely. I felt alive. But clarity brings its own kind of pain. I knew I couldn't just disappear and hope things would fix themselves. Ethan and Chloe had crossed a line, and if I didn't draw one back, they'd walk right over me again. I thought about the apartment's ownership, about the money Arthur and I had given them, and the will tucked in my wooden box. The words from the lawyer who helped us all those years ago floated back. "Keep this safe, Eleanor. You never know when fairness will need proof." The next morning, I found his old business card still in the box. The corners were yellowed, but the name was clear. Daniel Lewis, attorney at law. He had been Arthur's favorite student, kind and sharp as a knife. My hands trembled a little as I dialed his office number. "Lewis and Marks Legal. Good morning." A young woman answered. "Good morning, dear," I said. "This is Eleanor Hayes. I was hoping to speak with Mr. Lewis. It's about a will he helped prepare some years ago." There was a pause, then a soft intake of breath. "Mrs. Hayes? One moment, please." A familiar voice came on the line, older but unmistakably warm. "Eleanor." My God, it's been ages. I'm so sorry about Arthur. I still remember his lectures. He used to say the law wasn't about punishment, it was about protection. "That sounds like him," I said, my throat tightening. "Daniel, I wouldn't be calling unless it was important." "I'm listening," he said gently. I told him everything. How I'd been living with Ethan and Chloe, the way they'd changed the locks, the humiliation, the word outsider. I kept my voice steady, but Daniel heard the cracks anyway. When I finished, he was silent for a moment. "Eleanor," he said finally, "you have more power than you think. That apartment is still legally yours. When Arthur passed, his share was transferred to you and Ethan, but you retain full control over the property. And that will you mentioned, it's binding. It grants you lifetime residence rights and ties Ethan's inheritance to his duty of care. If he fails that duty, his inheritance can be revoked." His words fell like stones in still water. I hadn't realized how tense I'd been until that moment. I leaned back in my chair and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "So I can stay here," I said softly. "Not only stay," he replied, his tone firm now. "You can demand respect for your rights, what they did, changing the lock. Denying you entry is a violation of elder protection laws. It's not just cruel, it's illegal." I stared at the sunlight stretching across the floorboards, thinking about how Chloe's voice had dripped with scorn when she said, "Outsider." "Daniel," I said, "I don't want revenge. I just want peace, but I won't be humiliated again." "That's exactly what the law is for," he said, "to make peace possible." He promised to send me a formal statement confirming my ownership rights and advised me to document everything, messages, witnesses, any harassment. Before hanging up, he added softly, "Arthur would be proud of you. You're standing up for yourself now." After the call, I sat at the window for a long time, watching the traffic lights change. The city outside looked different. Same buildings, same skyline, but I saw it through new eyes. I wasn't an old woman hiding from her son's household anymore. I was someone rebuilding her own fortress, brick by brick, with law instead of fear. The next few days passed quietly. I cleaned, scrubbed, and aired out every corner. The work left me aching, but it also healed something deeper, My neighbors, most of them retirees like me, stopped by to say hello, offering spare chairs and small talk. No pity, just simple kindness. One evening, as I sat by the window with a cup of tea, I realized how long it had been since I felt safe in my own skin. For the first time in years, I could breathe without apologizing for taking up space. Then my phone rang. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. "Mrs. Hayes?" a man's voice said. "This is Kevin from Meadowstone Realty. We heard your apartment might be available for sale. Would you be interested in listing it?" My hand tightened around the phone. "No," I said slowly. "Where did you get that information?" "Oh, from your son's family. I believe they mentioned—" I didn't let him finish. I hung up and sat there, heart pounding. So this was their next move. The quiet strength I'd been building turned cold and sharp. If they wanted a fight, I thought, they'd just chosen the wrong woman to underestimate. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of what came next. The phone call from the realtor was the final straw. For years, I had swallowed humiliation, reasoning, excuses. But this was theft disguised as concern. My son and his wife were trying to sell the only thing I had left that still felt like mine. I called Daniel first thing in the morning. The sound of his voice steadied me. "They've reached out to a realtor," I told him. "They're trying to sell my apartment behind my back." His tone hardened. "That's fraud. Eleanor, you're the legal owner. They have no claim without your written consent. I'll send a notice immediately." By noon, a formal cease and desist letter was on its way to Ethan and Chloe's address, sharp as a blade and twice as cold. Daniel's assistant read the final line aloud before mailing it. "Any further attempt to transfer, advertise, or encumber the property will constitute a criminal offense under state elder protection statutes." I thanked her, then hung up and stood by the window. Outside, the street glistened from a morning drizzle. For the first time in a long while, I felt something close to power, not anger, but steadiness. Arthur used to say that real strength doesn't shout, it just stands and refuses to move. 2 days passed before the retaliation began. Flyers appeared in the lobby, cheap white sheets with bold black letters, "Missing woman's sanity, Eleanor Hayes." They claimed I was senile, that I'd been taken advantage of by shady lawyers. One even suggested I was under psychiatric evaluation. I stood there holding a flyer while 2 neighbors whispered nearby. My ears burned, but I didn't tear it down. Instead, I folded it neatly and took it upstairs. Proof. That night, the phone rang. The caller ID said Ethan, but when I answered, it was Chloe's voice. Sweet, sugar-coated poison. "Mom," she began softly, "I heard about those awful rumors. People online are saying terrible things. Maybe it's better if you come stay with us again. We'll handle your affairs. Make sure you're safe." I closed my eyes, listening to her false sympathy drip through the receiver. "You mean the rumors you started," I said quietly. There was a beat of silence. Then she laughed, light and brittle. "You always think the world revolves around you. We're trying to help, Eleanor. But if you'd rather live alone in that dusty old place—" "Stop," I said, my voice calm but final. "You've crossed the line, Chloe." "Oh? And what exactly are you going to do about it?" Her mockery sharpened. "Wave that old will around again. No one takes you seriously anymore." Something inside me cooled. My fear was gone. "You have 7 days, I told her. 7 days for what? To apologize publicly, I said, and to promise you'll never contact me again. She laughed again, louder this time, though I could hear the unease beneath it. Or what? Or the next time you hear from me, I said. It'll be through a courtroom summons." Her laughter stopped. I waited for a reply, but there was only breathing, hers, shallow and angry. Then the line went dead. The next morning, Daniel came to my apartment. He carried a folder of documents and a thermos of coffee. "You sounded serious," he said, settling at my small table. "I am," I answered. "She thinks I won't follow through." He opened the folder. "Then we'll make sure she's wrong." Together we reviewed everything. The flyers, the realtor's voicemail, even the call I'd recorded with Chloe's permission from our state's one-party consent rule. Daniel drafted the final notice, precise and merciless, a legal ultimatum granting 7 days for a full written apology and retraction of defamatory statements. Failure would result in civil and criminal proceedings under elder abuse statutes. When he slid the papers toward me, I signed without hesitation. My signature came out straight, firm, unapologetic. As soon as he left, I watched the rain turn to snow outside. The white flakes gathered on the windowsill, soft yet unstoppable. I thought of how many years I'd mistaken patience for weakness. I had been quiet because I wanted peace, but peace without respect is just silence forced on the powerless. That night, I dreamed of Arthur again. He stood at our old porch, smiling, holding open the door. No words, just the steady warmth of someone who believed I was capable. I woke with tears on my cheeks, but they weren't from sorrow. 7 days. That was all I was giving them, and for once, I wasn't the one waiting to be forgiven. The 7th day came quietly. No calls, no apology, no acknowledgement. Daniel filed the lawsuit that afternoon. I watched him drop the envelope into the outgoing mail slot, thick, official, and final. When the slot closed with a metallic snap, a strange calm settled over me. I'd thought victory would feel loud, triumphant. Instead, it felt like the hush after a long storm. 2 weeks later, the legal notice reached them. I didn't expect an immediate response, but on the 3rd morning, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan standing there, hands jammed into his pockets, snow melting in his hair. When I opened the door, he looked smaller than I remembered. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside. He came in slowly, glancing around the apartment as if it were a museum of our family. "I didn't know she was doing all that," he began. "The flyers, the rumors. I swear I didn't." "Maybe not," I said, "but you didn't stop her either." He lowered his head. "You're right." We sat across from each other, the silence thick with years of words we hadn't said. "Finally," he whispered, "I don't want this to go to court." "Then it doesn't have to," I said. "There's still a way to end it without another paper filed." That evening, with Daniel's mediation, we met in a small office downtown. Chloe sat beside Ethan, her usual poise gone. She couldn't look at me. Daniel read through the settlement terms: apology, public retraction, withdrawal of their inheritance claim, and a restraining clause preventing further harassment. When it was time to sign, Chloe hesitated. "This is humiliating," she muttered. Daniel didn't blink. "So is elder abuse. Mrs. Hayes." She pressed her lips together and signed. Ethan followed. I added my signature last. The sound of pen against paper was soft, but it felt heavier than any argument we'd ever had. A court officer notarized the agreement and handed me a copy. "It's binding," he said. "They're done." Outside, snow began to fall again, thick and slow. We stood under the awning for a moment. Ethan turned to me, eyes wet. "I'm sorry, Mom." "I know," I said gently. "Take care of your family." He nodded, then walked away. arm around Chloe. I watched them disappear into the blur of snow and traffic until I couldn't see them anymore. That night, back in my apartment, I made tea and opened the window just enough to let the cold air in. The city lights shimmered through the falling snow like quiet forgiveness. On the counter lay the signed agreement, its edges catching the glow of the lamp. I thought about everything I'd lost, my son's closeness, the illusion of family unity, but I also thought about what I'd regained, my home, my dignity, my peace. I whispered into the quiet. Justice can't make people love you, but it can make them respect what you are. Then I turned off the light, letting the snow fall through the silence, and for the first time in years, I slept without fear.